Hey everybody, so I'm here over at the Minnesota State Capitol because God damn, it's always blown out. I was told by some of the couch surfing folks, well, one of the couch surfing folks, Amy, that I hung out with yesterday, that I should visit the Minnesota State Capitol for some reason. Well, because there's a lot of interesting things there. So taking a little bit of a detour on my traveling day, see if I could take the tour here and enjoy all the history and the beauty and grandeur of the Minnesota State Capitol. So I'm here waiting in the State Capitol for the tours, which I think will begin at 10. But you know, it's a pretty nice looking state capitol. Couldn't say that I knew what New Jersey State Capitol looked like, but it's pretty nice. It's very grand. You can see here. It's got memorabilia. It's got stuff from different wars. Oop. It's got people dropping things. It's got a flag.
There is waiting for you. You can't go in and register to know volunteers, but I'm tired.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
We're going to be seeing some really, really cool things. Typically, what I do in each space is I briefly explain the form and function, and then I delve a little bit more deeply into the art and the architecture, kind of how that connects to Minnesota history. So we're going to actually be starting with the fanciest room in the Capitol. And we can take a seat in these chairs if we like. Now, before I tell us about the space we're in, I'd like to just give us a little brief history on the building itself. So this is actually Minnesota's third state capitol building. The first one was actually built in 1853 before Minnesota was even a state. That was our territorial capitol building. 1858, Minnesota becomes a state, so it turns into the state capitol building. It was a very beautiful building, but it was built largely out of wood and lit via candlelight. So as you can imagine, in 1881, that building burned down in a fire. Now, 2 years later, they built the second state capitol building in relatively the same spot, which was kind of in the center of downtown St. Paul off of 10th Wabasha and Exchange Streets. And that building, it had three really big issues right off the bat. The first big issue of the second state capitol building is it wasn't big enough. Not everyone could fit in the building to work. Not everyone had an office. Not everyone could fit in the chambers to vote. The second really big issue was the ventilation was poor. If you lit a fire in the fireplace, which is what you had to do to keep warm in the 1880s, the whole building would fill with smoke. And everyone who worked in the second state capitol building worked in the first one that burned down. So you can imagine, you've experienced a fire, you have smoke coming into your office space, you'd have legislators grabbing their whatever documents they could get their hands on and running out the front steps. They evacuated that building multiple times thinking it was going to burn down. So as you can imagine, they were getting very tired of doing that. The last major issue of the second state capitol, in my opinion, the biggest issue is it was ugly. I mean, it was just not a pretty building. When I look at photographs of that building, I think it looks like a gigantic lemon. I know a few other historians who would argue it looks more like an American football, but the point being it was not a pretty building to look at. And you want to be impressed by the building where your state government works. So by the 1890s, there was a call for a new capitol building, one that would be big enough for Minnesota's growing government, one that would be fireproof, and of course, one that would be pretty to look at. In 1895, there was a contest where different architects across the country submitted their designs to a Capitol Commission team. Whoever won that contest, their design would be built. It would become the third state Capitol building. Have all sorts of meetings But nowadays, we typically use this for press conferences. If anyone's ever seen the governor of Minnesota on TV before, chances are you've seen them in this room. What we often do is we take this podium here, we move it to where this black X is, then you would have the governor addressing the state of Minnesota. You're actually sitting in where the press would sit. Now behind we have these three flags. We have the United States flag, the Minnesota state flag, and the White Earth Nation flag. The reason why we have the White Earth Nation flag there is because Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan is both a citizen of the United States as well as the White Earth Nation. She's actually the highest elected Ojibwe woman in history. It's really cool that we have her as our Lieutenant Governor. Now, when this room was originally designed, Cass Gilbert originally just wanted it to be painted white plaster walls, and that was it. And Channing Seavery, the head of the Capital Commission team, who was giving Cass Gilbert the money to design this building, did not like that idea. He said, absolutely not. This is where people are going to be meeting the head of the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is still a relatively young state when this building opened up, and he said, people might not know much about Minnesota. We need to impress them with this room. So he completely scrapped the design of the white plaster walls, and what he did, he based it off of the design of the Doge's Palace in Venice, Italy. If you've ever been to the Doge's Palace or ever go to Venice, Italy, you'd see a lot of this. You'd see the helmets, the torches, the swords, even the lion head with the wings that's above that door over there. That's actually the symbol of Venice. But what you would not see, and this is all Minnesota right here, we have corn, we've got wheat, and we've got acorns. All of that is symbols of Minnesota agriculture and industries that were really moving Minnesota forward by the time this building opened up. So you have the grain industry in the south. You have the lumber industry in the north. And it's actually not depicted in this room, but you also have the Iron Range in the north as well. That was the big, those were the three really major industries that were moving Minnesota forward by 1905 when this building opened up. We also have these portraits depicting Minnesota regiments involved in the United States Civil War. And a lot of people, especially people out of state, especially people from the East Coast, are often surprised when they hear that Minnesota was involved in the Civil War. I've been asked by a New Yorker, was Minnesota even a state when the Civil War was going on? Minnesota was only 3 years old when the Civil War began. But that did not keep it from being the first state to volunteer troops to fight for the Union. Minnesota's governor at the time, Alexander Ramsey, was in Washington, D.C. when the guns fired on Fort Sumter. He was able to go up to the Secretary of War and tell Lincoln, I'm going to give him 1,000 Minnesotans to fight for the Union. We actually see those 1,000 Minnesotans right over here in that painting. That is the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Regiment. Now, by this point, they had been fighting for 2 years. Of the original 1,000, there was only 262 of them left at this point. So their job, they weren't supposed to be a frontline force. They were supposed to be in the back protecting supplies, protecting cannons. Unfortunately, the line of troops that was in front of them that day, they went on a charge they weren't supposed to. Many of them perished, and there was this huge gap in this 7-mile wide Union line. About 1,200 Confederate soldiers saw this, and they were going to go through that gap. If they got through that gap, they could have destroyed the Union Army right there, ending the Civil War with the Battle of Gettysburg. Those paintings are still in this building. We moved them to the 3rd floor in the Cass Gilbert Library. There you would have seen the painting of Father Hennepin blessing the Falls of St. Anthony. And here you would have seen the sign of the Traverse des Sioux. Part of the reason why we moved them to a different space, there were historical inaccuracies in them. For example, in Father Hennepin blessing the Falls of St. Anthony, there is a Dakota woman who is bare-chested. Dakota women always covered up because in Minnesota, if it's not for the snow, it's for the mosquitoes. And here, the sign of the Traverse des Sioux, it was very accurately portrayed. It's a very dark moment of Minnesota's history. It's a very important moment. It is how the southern half of the state was obtained, but it also displaced the Dakota people, would lead to the Dakota conflict in 1862, and also the largest mass execution in United States history in downtown Mankato. And because of that, we thought it best to move those to another floor. Because we still use this area for TV broadcasts and whatnot. So, all right. Any other questions before we go on to our next stop? Mm-hmm. So we could go between the two sides who are ready to go to war with each other. In this case, the church and the state, who historically have been bitter rivals. We see that he has his hand on the sheath of his sword. And that's symbolic in the fact that he's saying, let's not fight. let's not resort to violence, but let's listen to what each side has to say and come to a compromise. And that is exactly what the justices are doing here. They're listening to the appellant, they're listening to the respondent, and they're figuring out the best way to uphold the law. Speaking of upholding the law, that's what the word lex in Latin means. That means law. This is the one chamber when you come to watch your government work, because we have the right to do that. These benches are for the public. Anytime they're having a hearing here, we can sit in and watch them work. We also have these cameras so that you can live stream it too on their website. But this is the one chamber in this Capitol building where we All right, so for our next stop, I just have a quick little spiel before we get to it. We are actually going to be going to the rooftop to see gold horses. Once everyone's up here, we can. All right, you know. And don't be shy, they don't bite. They only come to life at night.
All right.
Don't be shy, they don't bite.
What church is that?
Which sure that is the St. Paul Cathedral. Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about that once we're all. Well, first, we'll tell us about the horses. What we are seeing, this is a quadriga. This is based off of a very popular design. You'd see this in Europe, for instance, if you've ever been to Berlin. It's on the Brandenburg Gate. This specific quadriga, however, is titled "The Progress of State," and everything here symbolizes something. So you have 4 horses. Those 4 horses symbolize the elements: water, fire, earth, and air. 'Cause if we have any fellow Minnesotans, we know that the elements, they really dictate our way of life. Once war comes, I'll tell you that. But there's 2 women in front of the horses. Those women represent agriculture and industries. 2 things that were really moving Minnesota forward by 1905 when this building opened up. Now, the man driving the chariot, he's Prosperity. He has a cornucopia in his right arm, so that's a horn full of food, showing that Minnesota has a lot going for it. Minnesota has a lot to offer. And in his left hand, we see that he has a staff that says Minnesota. That's to show you that this is the progress of the state of Minnesota. Minnesota has arrived as the 32nd state in the United States, and it's ready to move forward. Lastly, I'd like to point out, we see that we have pineapple hubcaps. Pineapples are the universal symbol of hospitality. Minnesota wants to be welcoming to all that enter the state. Now the horses, they are moving directly down to the Mississippi River. We see there, the longest river in North America. Now, originally, this grassy mall we see in front of the Capitol, that was supposed to take you all the way through downtown. It was going to take you all the way to the river, turn into a bridge, and take you to Smith Avenue that you can see directly in front of us. Now, long story short, the reason why that did not happen is because we ran out of money. This was only supposed to be a $1.2 million project, ended up being a $4.5 million project. They were already way over budget.
Just the quadriga?
No, the whole building. The whole building. The whole building was $4.5 million. I don't know the exact amount of the quadriga, unfortunately. Cass Gilbert wanted $4 million more to have his grassy grassy mall to be completed. This Capitol Commission team told him no. One thing I'd like to mention, this was designed by a man named Daniel Chester French. He's the same artist who designed the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Originally, Cass Gilbert met him at the Chicago World's Fair. A lot of the artists actually that were commissioned to make paintings or other statues for his building, he met at the World's Fair. They were friends of Cass Gilbert. And Cass remembered he had this miniature version of this. Daniel Chester French made a miniature version of this at the World's Fair, and Cass Gilbert remembered that. So he gave French a call, and he said, "Hey, any chance you could make a bigger version of that for the Capitol building I'm making?" So it's a bronze skeleton. It's covered in 23.5 karat gold. Now, gold is a very fragile material. It doesn't very much like ice or snow, and we have a lot of ice and snow in Minnesota. So as you can imagine, every 35 to 40 years or so, we need to put a new layer of 23.5 karat gold on. The last time we did that was 2017. Took the horses down. They were doing work on it actually in Omaha, Nebraska, is where they were doing that work. And then they sent it back to St. Paul, and you could witness this I forget the exact day, but it was in spring of 2017 when you could witness them with a crane lifting it back up onto the rooftop. Organized, the Republican Party will be on the right side, and the Democratic Farmer Labor Party will be on the left side. And then that big chair over there, that's the Speaker of the House's chair. Current Speaker of the House is Melissa Hortman. That long desk that's in front of hers is the Chief Clerk's desk. I always like talking about the Chief Clerk because in my opinion, they have like one of the most stressful jobs in the Capitol, because what they do is they keep track of all of the paperwork of all of the bills that they're working on. And they work on thousands of bills per session. That's why, I mean, it's too much paperwork for one person to handle. As you can see, there's two chairs on either side of him. Those are his assistant clerks. He has a chair too, and I've never seen him use it because he's moving paperwork around everywhere. To his right, to his left, to members of the House that are on the North Star State, because in 1858, when we were founded, we were the northernmost state. Now, obviously, Alaska has us beat on that now, but we're still the North Star State. The woman sitting down is Sacagawea. Now, Sacagawea was never actually in Minnesota, but she did help Lewis and Clark explore the Louisiana Purchase, and much of Minnesota was obtained through the Louisiana Purchase. The standing Native American man represents the first people who were in Minnesota, the Dakota and the Ojibwe. And then on the right, we have French pioneers and explorers, the first Europeans to encounter Minnesota. We actually see the names of some of those French pioneers and explorers over here. Duluth is over there, Hennepin, LaSalle is on this pillar, and Perot is on that pillar over there. We probably recognize a few of those names. Duluth is a city on the North Shore, right on Lake Superior. Hennepin County is where Minneapolis is located. There's even a Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis. So. Then we also have a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, and the reason why we have Abraham Lincoln in our House of Representatives is because he was the first president that Minnesotans could vote for when Minnesota became a state. So Minnesota became a state in 1858, and Lincoln's election was 1860. And about 2/3 of Minnesotans who could vote at that time voted for Lincoln. So it's celebrating the fact that he was the first president that Minnesotans helped put into office.
It's Latin on
The Latin, Vox Populorum est Vox Dei, which means the voice of the people is the voice of God. Basically saying these people were elected by Minnesotans, they're working for Minnesotans, so working for their constituents. Now, the painter of the ceiling, he basically painted much of the ceiling we've seen in the Capitol. His name was Elmer Garnsey. And the thing about him is he actually has quite a bit of sense of humor. So occasionally he would put in a riddle or a joke in his paintings. And my favorite is in this chamber. We see an owl over an hourglass. And that is a play on words. He put that there as a reminder for the House of Representatives to use their time wisely. Because the work they do in here affects the Minnesotans that are out there. And let me tell you, when government is in session, you can, if there's a big group in the rotunda, you can hear them in here. Cask over.
All right, that was a really cool little tour, just long enough. So I'm going over to what Amy mentioned to me that I should go check out are the racist paintings that they took down, which is over here somewhere. Nope, I don't think it's over here. This is a nice little space. I think they meant in here. Or not, I don't know. I don't know where the rooms are that we're supposed to see the racist paintings in. But I'm just gonna keep looking around. I found the paintings.
But they would like people with green hair.
Oh, thank you. That's good. Can you explain, is it okay if can I ask you if you know anything about the history of these paintings?
Well, the concern is this is Mankato, where a lot of Indians with an uprising were hung.
Oh, wow.
15 hung. So they felt this peaceful signing of whatever is inappropriate. The other one is saying, get closer over here. that this woman without a top on
Oh, yeah, yeah.
would be totally
It's like
inappropriate
inaccurate, right?
in with Indian culture.
Yeah.
And that's why they said that should be gone.
Okay.
So,
Well, thanks for helping me out. I'm gonna take up some more pictures then.
Did you want to pop into my room for pictures? We're between speeches if you want to. Now's a good time. Yeah.
It's a really cool, kind of respectful room to these paintings. They didn't destroy them, but they put them in a place that was a little more appropriate. And they also give some really interesting context where they have the words of, I guess, other Minnesotans, I suppose maybe kind of important Minnesotans, about what their thoughts are about the history of Minnesota, these paintings, and what they represent. And they represent kind of a painful part of the history of Minnesota and America. I guess you're entitled, those people are entitled to their own opinion. There you go. Or a lot of the paintings that are displayed at the state capitol are found offensive, not just by Native people. We know from the Dakota language version of the 1851 treaty that entire sections were left out.
if you want to hear speeches,
My people came because of that treaty. They came over from Germany because they promised land that would be available. Or we have an opportunity to revisit this story in a way that affirms our shared humanity. We've got streets and buildings of all kinds named after Sibley, which was an important person, I think. Maybe he's in that painting. All right, I'm now in the basement area. I was told that maybe if I visit the Rathskeller, it would be kind of an interesting place because it's sort of like a German beer hall. It's very cellar-like, very dungeon-like in here. But like pretty dungeon, like the dungeon of like a palace. So the Rathskeller is supposed to be down in this direction. I think it's here. I'm looking for the Rathskeller.
Right here.
Oh, cool. All right. Look at this. Wow. It does look like a little German beer hall. And it has all these sayings that I don't understand because I don't understand German. This is really cool. This is a cool place to eat. I'm kind of getting hungry myself, but I gotta go. Oh man. All right, I think I'm good here. And this was kind of a cool little trip. Definitely worth it. I don't have any small change on me right now. Actually, wait, I do. All right, hold on. I might give a little bit of a small donation. I love how they know exactly what you mean when you say, where are the racist paintings? Like, I was talking to Amy from Couchsurfing. I'm like, are they gonna know what I mean? They're like, no, yeah, they'll know exactly what you mean. When you say, where are those racist paintings, they'll know exactly what you mean. And indeed they do. They know exactly what you mean. So I'm gonna find the historical society or whatever where the tour thing starts, and then I'll head out.